To start with, you just wrote this book, Trillions, which postulates that the way that we look at the internet today, with a few billion people looking at computers, is just going to be a very small part of the picture. So there's such hype about the Internet of Things. What do you think, like, the high order things are that we need to understand about this? Like, if just to set the level before we talk about the future.
So it's kind of interesting. I think maybe it helps if I start with maybe one or two of the metaphors and the approaches we used in the book, right?
Yeah.
So the book was called Trillions, and the idea was we have, for the last 100 or so years, we've been climbing this mountain of complexity, and it's computing. Maybe at the turn of the century, in 1900s, computing was a career. You got a job as a computer. You tabulated numbers. It was a job that you could have. And then suddenly we hit World War II, and we have places like Bletchley Park and things like that, where we're literally, that's maybe right here, where we're building colossal big buildings. We're literally calling them Colossus. And that's a building that is an electronic computer. We name it after the career. It's an electronic computer. And at some point, I think, there's an apocryphal story that the chairman of IBM says that there might be a worldwide market for about 5 computers. And they're trying to understand what this could really be, because they're picturing them as this. Then we have Xerox PARC, and we have, all the other kinds of things happening where we invent client server and the cloud and relational databases, and pretty soon we've got a PC, and we're at the top of this mountain, and we can look into the PC, and we could literally see a space. We can see folders, and we can see a space inside of the computer. That's really cool. The information is in the computer. And now we've gotten to this point where not only that, but we've got supercomputers in our pockets. We literally have 7 or 8 billion cell phones, right? So we've hit this pinnacle. We've got billions of computers. We actually have more computers than people, I think, right now. We have something like 7 or 8 billion. We actually make more than 10 billion microprocessors each year. So every year we're making more processors than people on the planet. And since 2007 or so, we actually make more transistors than grains of rice, and we make them cheaper. So we have reached this crazy pinnacle of computing where you can swipe your finger across a piece of glass, talk to somebody on the other side of the planet. You can type 140 characters and foment a revolution.
Since the world produces more active processing units than rices.
More transistors than grains of rice, and cheaper. They pack a lot of transistors on a microprocessor, but 10 billion microprocessors per year too, so more than, and this is just an economic reality, right? If I have to switch,
so that's like
really
10 billion times whatever,
every
50
year,
million
and it keeps going.
right?
It's not slowing down. So what happened is we get to the top of this mountain, and a lot of times if you ever climb a mountain, you notice that there's a bigger mountain on the other side, that this mountain was blocking it. This was like a foothill. And this other mountain is Trillions, and it goes up here and maybe comes down over here. And instead of billions of computers, it's trillions of computers. And it's sort of like a supersaturated solution. We've got all this computation. And we posited in Trillions that supersaturated solution of computing would suddenly have a little seed that we drop into the supersaturated solution. And we'll call that seed connectivity. So imagine that connectivity drops into that supersaturated solution. And this was, information in the computer, whether it was a supercomputer in your pocket. This is so big, this is trillions across here, that it's really going to shift to you, me, my product, my environment, my city, all being in the information. It's really like turning the sock inside out. And that's because it's not only a trillion things, like a trillion $1 bills. This is a trillion things sending a billion messages. This is a trillion things turning into bricks because somebody pushed a bad update. This is a trillion things that might have malicious intent and decide they want to mess with you, right? Turn all the refrigerator compressors on in the world tomorrow, and you can take down the power grid. So this is a fundamentally different world. We're talking about really a big scale, and so this is trillions, and we're less than 5 years away from hitting that number.
Less than 5 years from a trillion active devices talking to the internet?
Yeah. Well, I didn't say the internet.
But
I said connected.
Talking to something.
Yeah, and I think that's important. I think a lot of things you never want to connect to the
Right.
internet. So the vineyards in Europe all have American roots, right? Why? Because a blight swept through Europe and almost knocked out all the vines of all the wonderful wines in Europe. The fact that America, or the North American continent, was disconnected was actually valuable, because we could actually take American roots, North American roots, and actually graft them onto those vineyards. So disconnected, might be a good thing too, or we might want to make a really conscious decision about what's connected. That's why I don't really think the Internet of Things is a good way of framing this. This is about an era of unbounded malignant complexity because of connectivity and computing meets ordinary people.
So I think one of your points here is the Internet of Things kind of makes us think of that one network of networks, that big behemoth, that one thing.
Convenient.
And the problem with that is, from a complexity point of view, it's a little bit asking for it, because there's a lot of overhead to get onto that, so it prescribes a whole
lot
stack.
of overhead.
And then secondly, well, if everything was on that, it might be less genetically diverse than if we had, like, nature had a whole bunch of separate things.
Do you really want some guy in his underwear sitting on the other side of the planet to be able to take over your pacemaker while you're in the operating room?
Yeah.
I mean, you don't need that. You don't want that. It may be more proximal networks. It may be more peer-to-peer groups of networks that bubble up. So, I mean, this is a fundamental thing. We called it trillions. We decided not to call it the Internet of Things, because the Internet of Things to us is a small subset of this bigger challenge.
Okay, so we now push out, we get super saturated, things get connected.
Well, maybe let's stop for a second. How big is a trillion? That's the thing. People hear billions, and they hear trillions, and they, at most they think of trillions as the national debt, and that's $1 trillion $1 bills. But trillions and billions are really different numbers. So a wise man once explained to me that if you want to understand how big a number is, count back in seconds. So Peter, I'm going to ask you, and you can't look online.
I was going to show you if I had this.
So Peter, how far back from right now is 1,000,000 seconds?
1,000,000 seconds would be sometime last year.
It's actually a week and a half ago.
Okay.
Great. Okay, so now we're ready. 1,000,000 seconds. How far back? So 1,000,000,000 seconds from right now.
When I was in second grade. No.
I doubt it.
But that's billion. Okay,
I think you're older than that. So it's kind of like, okay, well, that was probably like the late 80s.
Okay,
right?
billion seconds. Okay, fine.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
So a week and a half, the late 80s. Great, we're ready. I mean, now we're ready. 1,000,000, week and a half, billion, the late 80s. How far back is 1 trillion seconds? This shouldn't be hard now.
Okay, that's 1,000 times more than 30 years. So 30,000 years ago?
30,000 years ago.
Yeah.
So 1 trillion of just things that are all the same, like $1 trillion $1 bills. 30,000 years ago, we were living in caves. We were trying to get dogs to like us, right?
Yeah.
But this isn't 1 trillion things. It's 1 trillion things sending 1 billion messages. So about 1.5 years ago at a hacker conference in Australia, a hacker showed off taking over a pacemaker from 100 feet away wirelessly, turning it into an infection vector, injecting a 900 volt lethal shock, and making it an infection vector so if it came within 100 feet of any other pacemaker, it would do that as well. There's a thing on Hackaday that you can download. It's a little circuit board that you can embed inside of like a Sharpie. And you can shove it in the bottom of any Holiday Inn room in America and open up the door and go and rob the place. And in fact, last year, some robbers in Arizona were captured using that hack. So this isn't about really sexy, exciting things. This is about the most boring stuff in the world suddenly becoming malignant. And this is about that kind of complexity. And that's the world we're living in. And so I think the history books are going to call this next era, the real information age, an era of unbounded malignant complexity meets normal people.
Surely there's the flip side of this, which is kind of unbounded connectivity and opportunities to build our built world in any way we can.
Yes. So think about this. We're fighting over the last few inches of this last thing, the web and relational database. We are trying to fight over it. MySpace has to die for Facebook to win, right? There's not a lot of economic activity on this mountain. But this mountain, anything multiplied by 1 trillion is a really interesting number.
This is a really big point, which is if you're trying to figure out where the economic opportunity is, the biggest thing that we could possibly have is the amount of data we're making and things that are connected to it.
And the reason I say that is because today there is exhaust data pouring out all over the place, right? It's just pouring on the ground. It's like industrial waste all over the place. So I'll use a really simple example, really boring. There's a company out there that makes 40 million garage door openers. So there are 40 million openers of motors that are sitting in your garage, and they have sensors in them. In fact, they all have vibration sensors built in. Now, they're not on the internet. They're not connected in any way, but they all have vibration sensors to tune it so that the guy installing it can make it quiet. So it's not for anything other than to make it quiet. You don't want a garage door that's loud.
It's like a massive distributed earthquake network?
Yeah, boom, tomorrow, connect it, and you've got better data about tremors, earthquakes, earth movements by geolocation, because you know every zip code, than anybody could ever have built from NOAA or the other big National Oceanographic or whatever agencies overnight. Now put a little camera in that garage door opener so you can look down, and so on your phone you could see if it was your wife's car, your husband's car, your kid's car, who's home. Now take that. Oh, by the way, that thing is like an oil well installed in your garage for 10 years. It's got the arrow of time. It's just sitting there. And it's collecting all that exhaust data. Now take the exhaust data of those little cameras looking down and look for 10 years at the degradation of paint on those cars. That's data that somebody like PPG, who makes the paint, might be really interested in. Look at the color selections across all those things over that period of time, and now you can actually start looking at trending for car dealers that might be interested in things. And so what you notice is this is really going to be an ecology. And the way ecologies work is whatever you make as waste, somebody else thinks of as food. And so this exhaust data is potentially able to power massive change, savings in energy, insights into what can happen, new kinds of business models. So that's the real big deal here. Anything multiplied by 1 trillion is an interesting number. I think we're going to hit this era where we have T-commerce. And it's really trillions commerce. It's really like fractional, just fractions of a penny. But when we start combining these sort of strange bedfellows, we get really interesting numbers. Why do you think Google bought Nest? Because they wanted to install an oil well between your kitchen and your living room. Why are they oversensing it? Because they know they're there for 10 years. Let's go find some interesting stuff that's pouring on the ground.
And we're still, in this conversation, talking about discrete devices that we could think of as having a microprocessor. Sure. We haven't even gotten to the 500 computers in your closet because they're your shirts or your pants.
I don't know. It's coming.
So, the stuff we talked about so far is kind of the data effect of this.
That's the
we sense
information
results,
side. Right?
We haven't even gotten to the point that this shit is addressable in some network to go take actions.
Yeah, let's talk about taking action. So we also have the rise of 3D printing. We have the rise of basically being able to manufacture on the fly, right? So not only do we have this change happening in the world where we have sensing, and we have the ability to have feedback loops and actual facts, right? We'll have the social network of products, where this product is saying, I'm doing a great job, but all the products around it are like, not so much, right? So suddenly we will have the ability to not have anecdote, like the social network, but we're gonna have fact, and we're gonna have it over the long tail of time. So you've got that, that's fine, but if you can't change anything, what's the point? So actuation is the other part, which is really exciting. And so we've got things like 3D printers, we can change things every day. Last year, Invisalign, the guys who make those little retainers, they made more than 3 million Invisalign products, and they were all 3D printed. And so they didn't have a SKU for each one of those products, right? They didn't have a stock keeping unit where they designed each one of those products for 3 million people. No, they created a seed. They created like a species of product. And they said, look, here's what we care about, with our teeth. We want these to be clear. We want this to be really beautiful looking. We want it to be made of this special material we've engineered. These are the things that are constant. This is our brand. It needs to be this, or else it's not Invisalign. Those are the constants. And then they decide some variables. They said, well, the doctor might want to tighten the teeth at a certain speed, and if you go too fast over time, it's going to hurt a little bit. The patient has a certain size head that we can learn by scanning it with an MRI machine. Right? We also know that kids have different size mouths and heads than their parents. So these guys supplied the variables. And in a sense, this was the design of a little authoring tool that actually made 3 million things. And they were not made by one person. It was sort of designed for loss of control. It went out into the community and it was designed together.
There's this interesting conceptual leap. So that always comes up and is never that well explained, which is why when we talk about the Internet of Things, we also talk about 3D and mass manufacturing, right? So I want to just get to this, because they appear to be two different sets of things, but they always end up like dancing together.
Well, I think they're both in a hype cycle right now. You gotta take that. I think there are a few different threads that all come together, and let me put them together for you, and at least give you my opinion on this. So imagine that I'm holding a pool cue and I'm just dangling it here. This is a static equilibrium, right? So if I just dangle a pool cue, at some point it'll stop moving. I could look away, I can set it on the ground. As long as the world doesn't change, it's just going to sit there. When you're designing products, you're always trying to find an equilibrium. You know, you have to find how much it costs to make versus how much people are willing to spend. How your product fits against the competitors. How much waste it creates versus how much, you know, value it brings. How dangerous it is. I mean, I'm probably 6 feet away from an electrical cord that I could shove a fork into and kill myself. But we've decided that the danger is outweighed by the value of electricity. So there's always this equilibrium, although it's a static equilibrium because the world doesn't change that much. So I've got this, you know, I'm holding, you know, this pool cue like this, and I don't really have to think too much about it, and that's the Industrial Revolution, right? I've created a beautiful static equilibrium. So why do we talk about 3D printing and sensing and all that kind of stuff, the Internet of Things together? Because in nature, you don't find many static equilibriums. In nature, what you find is it's more like this. It's more like you're balancing a pool cue because the whole world is changing. You know, that's how we walk, right? We're constantly falling and then catching ourselves. The fact that we can just stand here is the dynamic equilibrium. The wind blows, I'm still standing. Now, if you look at that, if you look at balancing a pool cue like this, you find out you need some different stuff. It's more like surfing a wave, right? So what do I need to do to actually do a dynamic equilibrium? Can you tell what I need to do? Like, what are some of the parts that I need to have? I need to be able to move my muscles here, right?
So you have to sense. You have to.
I have to look at it. Yeah, I can't do this blind. If I close my eyes, it'll fall over. So think about that for a second. Let's shift this to, you know, holding my finger out and having the pool cue like this. So I need a sense. So I got to have eyes, and I've got to look at the right thing, right? If I look at the top of the pool cue, I can balance it because there's enough time and it actually moves enough. If I look at the bottom of the pool cue, it just falls on the ground, right? Because I don't have enough time to react and I can't see the pattern. So I have to sense the right thing. I can't sense the wrong thing. What else do I need aside from sensing?
Well, you need feedback loops, and then you need
feedback loops.
Yeah.
Wait, that's the internet. That's connectivity, right? Remember, I said connectivity was going to be a really big deal. So you've got to have some consistent feedback loop. Now, for the first time in human history, we've got a feedback loop, and sensing is getting to be a lot easier to put into things. So we've got sensing. That's the beginning of the Internet of Things. We've got the feedback loop. We also have to have activation, right? We have to change our muscles. Well, 3D printing. So there's 3D printing, right? I can make a different factory every day, right? I can change things. I can have robots that actually like trigger stuff. I can have the Roomba actually go clean something that it discovers is dirty. So I've got this ability suddenly to change things. I've got the ability to sense it. What am I missing? There's something else that's missing here. Just feedback loops. If I set up just a simple circuit to do this, you know.
I now need physical actuators, and I need the ability.
Well, so actuators, let's call this whole thing actuation, right? So being able to change things.
All right.
So you also have gravity and the whole environment, right? There might be winds blowing and things like that. So that's just the external ecosystem. So what else do you have? Well, it turns out you've got a brain, right? So you learn. If it's too windy, you actually learn how to balance differently. If you can't move your muscles that much, you learn. So you've got learning. So right in here, there's learning. Inductive thinking and stuff like that. Okay, so we've got Watson, we've got Siri, we've got learning. So we've got learning, we've got sensing, we've got actuation. So the first time in human history, we have all the parts that nature takes for granted. And so that's why I think we're going to shift from this space, which is static equilibrium, which is great as long as the world doesn't change, to dynamic equilibrium. So remember these mountains that I was talking about earlier? You can kind of think of them as slow-moving waves, right? And in our first book, we said they're kind of like giant tectonic waves, right? Well, you know, I'm working on a sequel, and the sequel is basically, those are waves, and it's about surfing. And this is the way the world is going to change. How do we design for emergence? How do we design for when things are in dynamic states? If we do it right, we have agility and adaptability. That's why nature chose that. But there's a lot of work to get there.
So when dynamic equilibrium, products and things, and the products themselves learn to stand up, learn their environment, learn to adapt, change their function, become sentient. That's very literal way.
Maybe, yeah.
Right, but then this is also about, in manufacturing, the collapsing of the supply chain and design cycle from it takes years into we're down
on demand and yeah. Well, I think there's that. I think the
how
3D
does dynamic equilibrium express
fit
itself?
in that? Yeah, and I think part of that is 3D printing allows us to make some decisions about what's made of atoms and what's made of bits, and when it's made of atoms and when it's made of bits. And how do we rip things from atoms to bits and bits to atoms, right? And so that's actually, I think, going to cause a lot of economic opportunities, because people who are smart about it can figure out how to kind of game the system a little bit and choose where they're doing that. And I think at the extreme of this, we go from Henry Ford developed this totally vertical manufacturing approach. Trees came in one end. He tried to buy up and create an entire town in the Amazon rainforest just to get rubber. Never really succeeded, but he really wanted to integrate every aspect. Trees came in one end. The River Rouge factory was like a city, and cars came out the other. It was all vertically integrated. Great. Again, nothing much changed. As long as you can have any car, as long as it's black. That was his thing, right? Any color, as long as it's black. Now, the difference here is we could be looking at something like Tech Shop. Has thousands of members. It's scattered across the country. It's a lot of people who know how to make things locally. What if you had an exchange matrix that could basically look at any blueprint and say, hey, there's some local material around here that's about to go to the end of life. If I bid on it right now, I could actually get it. I never harvest from more than 100 miles away. And suddenly we go to a massively horizontal distribution system, where it's much more like an ecology, where things are sort of locally farmed and used, and only the rarest things get shipped long distance. And people are going to look at the 20th century amazing containerization and shipping of everything around the world, and they're going to laugh at it. Right? Nature laughs at the stuff that we've been doing in the 20th century.
We're beginning to see the first examples of this now with the sharing economy, with just the beginning of Airbnb or Ubers or anything like that, where some product...
Feedback loops, yeah. We're suddenly able to have them participate in the economy. And it immediately exposes waste. And immediately exposes opportunities for economic players to play in the system. So, I mean, we actually strongly, in our book Trillions, we strongly believe in markets. I mean, nature's a pretty aggressive market, survival of the fittest. But I think there's this opportunity of creating fertile soil, right? And so I think part of this is how do we, as designers, how do we as business people, stop trying to design from the top down? Like I could design an apple. Like here's an apple. It's a perfect apple. I'm going to call it Golden Delicious. It's going to be really crunchy. It's going to have like 8 seeds in it. I can control everything about the apple. Great. What if tastes change? What if it won't grow in the soil that I have? What if I move to a different place and I can't plant it? That's designing from the top down. So I think the big deal here is learning how to design for emergence. So now let's say design a seed. Design a few seeds. Only God can tell you, according to one philosopher, how many apples are in a seed, right? It is emergent. And in fact, apples I pick as a really interesting example because they're what's called heterozygotes, which means that if you plant a seed from a Macintosh apple, you will not get a Macintosh apple tree. It is wildly genetically serendipitous. It basically is like playing Las Vegas. You plant a seed, you don't know what's going to happen. What that did is it engaged the consumers, John Macintosh and his sons, to plant more seeds, to find another amazing, tasty thing. So it was really designed as something that they lost control a little, but you had to become a gardener. You had to cull out all the weeds. You had to find those kind of wildflowers and turn them to the sun. And I think we're going to find out that product designers, organizations, cities are going to actually have to take a more active role, treat it like a garden, provide fertile soil, and really have this more kind of active approach to it.
You could argue that this is what the web service world, which is in the bits thing, has been, because it's very quick, it learns, it adapts, minimal viable, it's kind of an emergent thing.
Sure.
And we've had this whole entrepreneurial economy with a whole bunch of kids who know that, and we're just about to apply that
to atoms, to the physical world. Now, I think that's an interesting question. So can we apply the web services world, can we apply all that stuff that we learned to the physical world? I think we can apply a lot of it. I don't think we can apply everything, because atoms are actually kind of an interesting thing. They cost money to harvest. You have to go mine them out of the ground. They're not what's called a non-rivalrous product. It's not like ideas. If I light a candle and I light your candle, I still have a candle lit. That's a non-rivalrous idea. There's no rivalry over flame. Property is rivalrous. The Boston Commons is a famous example of the tragedy of the commons, right? You'd put your horses in there and they would eat the food and nobody else had the food to eat. So there's this interesting tension between what has happened in the web services and the information space, which can sometimes be non-rivalrous, and the physical world that's rivalrous. Atoms cost money. And so can you give everything away for free in a sharing economy that has physical things? I'm not sure. Can you treat everything like designing for Angry Birds? in an era when if you put enough nests out there or enough thermostats that are connected out there, you might end up pushing a bad update. But always beta, but you push a bad update and suddenly people are freezing in a snowstorm somewhere. There are unintended consequences because you're actually changing bits. And I think that actually leads to this other thing that I would say, which is sort of, we're living in this sort of Angry Birds, world, really, really kind of cool. We can talk about, really angry birds that are casual games, and it's really simple, and we just ship it out there, and it's really fun, and it's all minimum viable product and all that. But sometimes we're really designing what ultimately are going to be like Dreamliners, and Dreamliners, you need 99.9999% reliability. And I don't know that we're even having the conversation. The VCs and everybody else wants to fund Angry Birds because it's easy, it sounds fun, it's cool, we can do it all with young kids. But then you find out that if you actually succeed, the Internet of Things and trillions means a lot of things and a lot of unintended consequences and weird runaway feedback loops. So getting a little smarter about this dynamic between Angry Birds and Dreamliners, I think, is going to turn out to be an important thing for entrepreneurs.
How are we doing whatever you need to know about your
I already reset it.
Okay.
So we have 13
Is this useful
minutes.
at all?
I think it's good. I want to switch again literal. I want to switch. Let's talk about kind of literal stuff like flexible ability to distribute control. So one way to get to that is this other startup you've been doing where you prototype something big, you print it down as an ASIC, and now you've got like control network thing. Do you have that thing here?
No, I don't.
Is there a picture of it on the net somewhere?
Yes, there is.
Okay, so let's talk about that because that's kind of a literal example of engineering.
So imagine if I said, here's my business plan. I'm going to take the most complex, most complicated, craziest piece of technology from 1969, 1975. I'm going to put all the most insane amount of computational stuff into it. I'm going to take a general purpose thing like this, and I'm going to put it in every doorbell in the world to get one bit of information. Pushed, not pushed. What if I told you that was my business plan?
We'd like to put an IBM 370
Yes,
in
for every doorbell.
Right.
It sounds crazy, right? And oh, by the way, it'll have lots of memory. It'll have an operating system. We're probably gonna have to patch it a lot, because it's from 1960 or 70. It's like kind of it's an interesting thing. That's what everybody's doing today. That's what the Nest is. That's what everything is doing today. They're basically putting a general purpose PC in the form of like maybe a single board computer, but really it's got all the cruft and technology from an era when memory was expensive, computing was expensive, networking was expensive. That's no longer the case. Every cell in your body has a storage of every single thing about you. Memory is dirt cheap in nature. And when you cut your leg, it does not call the cloud in the sky to fix it. It calls its buddies. It's all peer-to-peer. And so there's a fundamental shift from the things that worked in the era of cute little, internet and the web and stuff like that, which is a great sunset, but it's not the sunrise. The sunrise is saying, let's take this seriously. Let's take the least amount of computing for any one thing. That's the way nature works. The least amount of something. So atoms make molecules, make cells, make organs, make systems, make you, make us. It's layered complexity. And those stable layers, those plateaus of simple things that can make complex things allow us to build richness, right? We don't have that in the Internet of Things yet. And so one of the efforts that we're doing in our labs is to basically say, could we take the least amount of computing? Could we take just what it means to be a computational, just what it means to be storage, just what it means to be actuation or transduction, transducing from one thing to another? Could we take just what it means to be those things? Strip out all the operating systems, strip out all the other things. Don't leave any place to hide malicious content. Don't ever be able to even reboot it and change it or change the software. Treat it like a piece of plywood. I got bins of computing, I've got bins of nuts, I got bins of bolts, I got bins of plywood, I've got bins of repositories, I've got bins of actuation, right? The benefit of that is I trust it. I trust the piece of plywood. It's not going to suddenly change into something else. Today what happens is everybody makes everything so soft that nothing is trustworthy, which means nothing can build on anything else, right? So I trust gravity because the Big Bang burned the code, right? It's not open source. Imagine Loki comes up to my room. I'm 16 years old. I just spilled coffee all over myself when I was on a date. I'm really pissed off at gravity right now because I dropped my coffee cup and it fell. And Loki says, psst, I have an idea. I'm going to open source gravity for you, man. You can put in your own patch, right? And he goes and visits 100,000 other kids that night too, right? He's a trickster god. right? And you're like, yeah, I'm going to make anytime you have something with liquid in it that's hot and you drop it, it floats. Oh, that would be a great patch, man. That would be a great patch to gravity. And then someone else says, oh, it'd be really cool if I could like grab a bumper of a car and shake it and then pick it up. Oh, that'd be a pretty cool patch. What if I lean really hard and I could fly to Paris? That would be a cool patch. And then pretty soon, like nobody in any Starbucks in America can fill the coffee, right? And suddenly people can't build bridges and nobody can do anything. The reason we like gravity is because it's a contract between us and the universe, right? If I had this marker and I dropped it and like right now it hovered, you could fix that in special effects, right? Right there it hovered, right? You'd be like, okay, what's Mick doing, right? Because it would stop being science, it would stop being gravity, it would stop being trustworthy, it would become voodoo. Now it's like, oh, if I slaughter the lamb and it rains, maybe slaughtering lambs makes rain.
Right, and in complexity we have to trust things and we can't be rebooting it.
We have to trust
Windows
things.
Or Android
we have to trust things. If I now trust gravity, it's not going to go through my hand, then I can pile things on top of things, I can start building stuff that the designers never thought of before, I can create entirely new systems because I trust it.
Walk me in this thing you're building. So what I remember seeing was you had a bunch of capability.
Yep.
You breadboarded it. Then you built it into an ASIC. So you basically special perfect built something.
Yeah. So let's talk about that.
And then so there's the technical thing. There's an architecture that gets really clever, little and cheap. But then there are the applications of that, and I want to kind of push into.
Yeah.
And so what I'd like to do now is start pushing into applications.
Yeah. So every single time we need to have a button, we have to get a special purpose thing to do that, right? Every single time. We want to make something that converts two numbers to something. Some guy somewhere is going to write a piece of code for it, right? And so consequently, the basic things of the world we keep reinventing over and over and over again. The question was, could you build something that you could stack together? It's at human scale. You could print out an envelope. You could make a brand new product. Number one of the product, right? You just built it. It's an internet connected product. And people start buying it, right? And so suddenly you've got 10 of them, and then you've got 100 of them. And this is getting not cost effective because you snap stuff together. There's a lot of waste in between. It's multiple boards. You really want to collapse it down to one ASIC. What if you could, at that moment, just push a button and it basically slams it all together and makes it one ASIC? So it gets us over that kind of uncanny, dangerous valley between I can make one of something, I can make 100 of something, I can make 1,000, I can make 1,000,000 of something. So the idea here was to basically build it on modular decomposition, build it on this ability to like layer complexity, but also give you the chance from an economic standpoint to decide when to collapse. And just click a button. So the point of this system is I can author a $50 product. I can go from making one of something to making 1,000,000 of something and actually have an economic model for it. But also halfway in between there, I can throw it on the ground, it scatters into parts, and I can recycle it, right? I can use different parts from it. And if I get big enough, I can author a stadium. Same tool, right? I don't have to learn a different tool. It's just the basic stuff.
Author a stadium?
So author a stadium, author a $50 product, same tool, right? So the idea was it's still about,
author a stadium?
I mean, how would a stadium be totally internet connected? How would it be pervasive computing? How would it have all sorts of sensors in the seats and in the tables and in the walls and things like that? I'm just picking stadium as an example. It could be city.
City building.
Right?
The point is, we're breadboarding something.
We start with atoms, we build molecules, we build cells.
Knows the temperature, knows if the seat's up or not, counts the number of people, whatever we want to do.
Yep.
And our initial market is we're making 15 for the office, and it costs $5-10 a piece.
Yep.
And then, like somebody in China, somebody says I want 1,000, and at some point, what I'm technically doing is pushing a button, it prints an ASIC, and now I'm on a different.
I'm burning it. It maybe goes up a level in terms of how it's manufactured. Maybe the first ones I can make with 3D printers. The next ones I need to do a different manufacturing volume. But the point is, make it just as easy to do that stuff with atoms as it is with bits and with computation. So basically create little bits of mortar between the bricks of computation, but also get rid of all the complexity, at least amount of complexity, and burn the source code. Now you say, well, I like open source. I want to do that. That's great. Open component. Because you can always swap one out and put one in. And if you want to leave your component totally open, do it.
What are the components you're building? Like, what are the things they do? And
Some
what are the
examples.
markets that will be
Some
used?
examples. So 3 or 4 different flavors of Wi-Fi and wireless and things like that. So 802.15.4, 802.11, Bluetooth, blah, blah, blah. Just a bunch of different ones. Because why do we want to try to decide where the market will take it? We're going to create a fertile soil. We're going to let the market decide. So lots of different things. So I could go grab a cell phone one. I could go grab a Wi-Fi one. I could grab Bluetooth, snap it together. Boom, I've got cross-fertilization. Grab a Twitter one, snap it on. Boom, I've got connectivity to Twitter. Grab a servo one. It controls servos. Grab a Grab one that actually just uses temperature sensor, snap it on there. Grab a computation one, I get computation, snap more of them on there, I get parallel processing. Right? Put anything I want, a little bit of memory and things, and now I've got a black box to be able to do things. Snap a few of them together, and each one of them has a Wi-Fi thing on there. Drag this Wi-Fi's address to this one and that one to this one, and now I've got a massively peer-to-peer network, right? So zero infrastructure, massively distributed cloud, where everything, just like your DNA, is stored everywhere. So that's the kind of vision. It's early days. I mean, this is in the research labs. But we've got real working product, and we're probably going to be announcing and shipping some stuff early next year.
And one of the key points here, I mean, Neil Gershenfeld often talks about the fact that we have the BitNet of things, not the Internet of Things, because we always have to go back to the cloud for something. Yeah. And part of this is we can push processing, we can push storage, and why the hell do we want to go to a central something?
Why, when nature shows us that memory is cheap, computation is cheap, why would we be shifting this? Not to mention, I mentioned that...
Did you mention the book that the cloud was a conspiracy to return time sharing to us?
I do talk. So chapter 3 has all the bad news, and in chapter 3 of the book, we kind of sort of tell you the bad news. And one of the bad news parts is that peer-to-peer got a bad name. I think a little bit. Mesh networking, peer-to-peer got a bad name because of Napster. Because from an economic standpoint, you didn't have an easy way to track it. During Katrina, everybody had radios that were really powerful in their pockets. But nobody could talk between those radios because from a billing standpoint, I needed to send you to a central server called AT&T or Bell or whatever it was. So here we had computation, we had networks, we had everything, but because we had one way of thinking about it from a monetization standpoint, we basically didn't give ourselves that capability. So it's almost like the technical infrastructure that we built limited us from actually having new economic experiments. And what we're saying is let's actually build a rich technical infrastructure that scales without bounds, that scales to galaxies, that also allows you to do your own experiments with economics in the market.
Yeah, you went on a big screed about the cloud.
Probably did.
Right.
But the point about it wasn't our cloud is bad. Yeah. The point of it is that cloud's bad because it's client server from the 1960s, which means single point of failure. Right, so I said if you cut your leg, it mostly fixes it.
It's the business model where you get billed all the time as opposed to pushing stuff out.
Yeah, and that's a fine business model. I don't even have a problem with most of the business models that have come out of the cloud. I actually think the business model side of it's really interesting. Software as a service and all those X as a service things is wonderful. I think the problem is we've limited ourselves technically to have only one idea from a business standpoint. So people say, well, the cloud's great. What are you talking about? We make lots of copies. We're never going to lose anything. And you're like, well, how many copies is enough? Well, I don't know. If it's important, we'll make lots of copies. What, 100? 100 copies. How will we know what's important? So does that mean, I know what's important today. It's Lady Gaga videos and it's cat videos. So our grandchildren are going to be very proud of us because that's what we'll hand down to them. Is Lady Gaga videos and cat videos. Then you go, great. So we got lots of copies of Lady Gaga and cat videos. Who makes lots of copies? Oh, Amazon makes lots of copies. Google makes lots of copies. Great. How many copies of Google are there? How many copies of Google are there?
It's Google's copy of Google.
There's only one copy of Google. It's Google. So that means, I can do something bad to Google. And there are no singletons in nature. That seems weird to me. And so, we have a strong opinion about the need for us to be massively distributed. Now, nature chose put the memory of everything everywhere. So Craig Ventnor takes this HMS Beagle 2 out on the open seas, and he takes out barrels, and he starts pulling up seawater because he's trying to sequence all the different things that he can find because he's trying to build a new synthetic organism. It's amazing. He's got gene sequences on board, sheets of paper, he pulls them up, he's sequencing all this stuff. Before he went out, he identified that there were only, or scientists identified, there are only 2 kinds of organisms that have this gene that encode blue eyes. Okay, that's fine. In a particular kind of categories of organisms, this gene represents, and it's used for blue eyes. He pulls up this stuff out of the seawater. He finds 80% of all the stuff he pulls up has the same gene. It's used for photosynthesis, it's used for communication, it's used for color, it's used for camouflage. So nature used the ocean as its hard drive and decided on promiscuous replication. Replicate without bounds. We're not choosing that right now, but we might want to. Imagine the next Library of Alexandria scale fail. Because somebody threatens somebody.
It's kind of what we do with books, right? Books were massive.
Books are massive. It's a massive peer-to-peer system. Books, any single library is a client and a server. So, that's why it works so well. You can't get rid of Moby Dick if you tried.
When we think about some of the applications, so just like the other day when we were down at the wearables thing, just as a mundane thing, I pointed out that Well, today you can't, ridiculously, I mean, because who would have thought this? Nobody that we know ever walks around without a complete GPS system on them, right? All right. So we're just, how far could we possibly be from our clothing, knowing kind of our complete state about us and being able to report it, and then therefore have a commons and understand all of it. So let's talk about some of these
applications.
the applications that are kind of just far enough out that they astound us, but will be boringly common.
Well, I mean, I think the danger of trying to predict the future is you always sound silly in the future, right? You're never right about the details. You might have the broad strokes right. You're never going to be right about the details. So, I mean, I try not to do future casting because I think it's a fool's errand, right? I think the reality is it's happening. It's going to happen one way or the other. Nature's proven it's possible. Maybe we're going to go down some blind alleys.
Well, wait,
but I mean, I'm willing to speculate.
Yeah.
I'm just going to frame it first.
No, and by the way, I think, like, when I give this example, I often talk about the fact that in 1993 I was working with Bill Gates on the future of television. And so we imagined a bunch of stuff. We got the broad contours right. Like, we knew there'd be broadband, there'd be a big pipe, and we knew there'd be programming on the pipe, and we wanted our company to run it. What we missed was, we completely missed the long tail, we missed user-generated. So we actually missed all of the important things that made the broad contour of what we had in mind special.
Yes.
Right? So, I mean, I think, like, we know we'll print flexible wearables,
Sure.
and we know all that,
Sure.
but we haven't thought through it's these second-order effects. So I think we're
Well,
allowed to
that's right.
speculate, but then say, let's imagine how this does scenarioing.
Okay, I think that's fair. And I think part of this is the pattern is big ideas are easy, details are hard. Because they have to do with context. And we won't even believe the context, right? So that's the tricky part. So let's just try it. I went and interviewed a guy from Virginia Tech who's working on flexible wearable electronics. And he said, what's interesting about fabric is that it has its own latitude and longitude space. It's got the warp and the weft. So you can actually locate where the computation is happening, where the sensing is happening on your fabric. It's got its own GPS. That's kind of interesting because now you can kind of do things like roll up your sleeves. You roll up your sleeve. If you've got baggy pants on, you can kind of characterize that with some computer models, and you can tell if you're dancing the cha-cha, if you're dancing the lambada. You can tell if you're doing line dancing just from a baggy pair of pants. And he's actually got software to demonstrate that you can tell with sensing and with this kind of GPS on the clothing to do that. Well, wait a second. You're going to take that clothing and you're going to throw it in the dryer. Like, let's remember how clothing is used. A dryer is this giant motor that spins really fast and gets really hot. That sounds like a lot of energy. It's trying to dry the clothes, but couldn't it also be charging the Fitbit? I mean, why the hell are we even worried about batteries and things when we've got this other part of the ecosystem that is just going to do it anyway, right? It's going to be mixing stuff. It's probably connected to it. Could push updates. Who the heck knows? He also had an experiment with Intel where he had carpet modules that would go on endlessly and only run the app for the carpet, like how you find your way through a hospital or something like that, only on the carpet cell that's close to you. So this idea that multiple apps could run on clothing or multiple apps could run in carpet, and there's no single point of failure. Again, it's sort of hand me down the lane to be able to do things, so that you can do this. When we first had word processors, I don't know if you remember, right? Word processors were like this big thing. It looked like a calculator, and it had a little display, and it was sort of only running Word. And that was our vision of the future at some point. We'd have these special purpose computers that just did one thing. But then the PC came along and we noticed we could run lots of things on there. And I think that could be true of your shirts. That could be true of clothing. What if I could dynamically tell that I usually team up, a Kenneth Cole shirt with Levi's jeans? That might be valuable to somebody. What if I could tell if I'm sitting for too long and I have the chance of getting a blood clot because of the way I'm sitting? What if I have a chronic illness and I need to take my blood pressure once in a while? What they find is people that have chronic illnesses that have to take their blood pressure like every half an hour basically sit in a chair all day because they keep getting this alarm that they got to sit down. Well, what if the clothing could just watch what you're doing, and when it recognizes you're going to have dinner, then it goes and tests your blood. So instead of us changing to be bent to the will of these computers, what if instead of forcing us to become more and more computer literate, what if we shifted to the computers becoming more and more human literate? And I think that's one of the promises if we actually do this right. And wearables is one simple example of that. But I don't think we're thinking big enough.
That's the big point. It's really tough to think when you put intelligence in
Gotta
everything.
go bigger, yeah. That's the Angry Bird thinking in Dreamliner world. It's really, that's just one way of framing it. But I think we are not dreaming anywhere nearly big enough.
So we spent a little bit on healthcare and consumer kinds of things. there's a whole bunch of customer service implications of this that are, or, customer intimacy, that are at once fascinating and frightening if you understand the state of your customer. Peter Schwartz was telling me that Salesforce is coming out wearables next month. So as you think about...
that's what I would do. Yeah.
Huh?
That's what I would do.
Yeah. Right. Can I let you riff on the kind of the customer side of things? So much of the internet's been built on customer and marketing stuff, some of which really annoys us now because of it's invasive. So
so here's my riff on that, I guess. Maybe. And it goes back a little bit to this dynamic product equilibrium, right? So today we have paid media, which you buy, you run an advertisement, you have a Super Bowl commercial, you buy a big billboard, you pay for media. So I'm going to take media as an example. You've got owned media that you control. You own the packages that you can put anything you want on of your own product. You own your web pages, you own that kind of stuff. You have earned media, which is media that you earn through second party or third party validation, Amazon likes and reviews and social. And that's great because someone else is validating you. I think there's this emergence of a new thing called made media. And it's just like that Invisalign teeth or other kinds of things where together you make it with your customer, which means your customer is telling their story, not telling your brand story, right? So instead of me trying to convince you that you're cool because you wear my clothes, I give you a way to be cool with your clothes and you make it your own. And because Bill Joy's law says there are a lot more smart people outside of the company than inside, you're harnessing the people at the edges. You're getting them to be entrepreneurs with you. And they're telling their own story. And I think it's made media because literally we might 3D print it tomorrow. We might literally make it just for that moment. So we did an experiment with Oreo and Twitter, right? And the idea was, what if you could print out a brand new Oreo cookie from 16,000 variations based on what was trending in the world? And so daylight savings time is trending. It suddenly is printing cookies that have starbursts of lemon and other kinds of icing, right? So orange and lemon icing, that's the starburst. So this idea that dynamically you could manufacture this, the factory could literally change based on what you're doing. And if you say, I don't think that's what daylight savings time is, I think it's more like this flavor and this flavor, and you come up with something that's better, you become part of the actual process. So you're part of the ecology as well in the market. So I think that is going to change the way customer service works. I think that is going to change the way things work because we'll be able to change things and react. We're going to muscle. We're going to be able to help invite them in and have them tell their own story. And so made media goes all the way back to that seed, because made media is what you sow. If earned media is what you reap from third parties, made media is planting seeds, becoming a gardener, and then being active about it.
The stuff that we see with GE and Quirky, kind of just like, what other examples we have today?
Well, I think that's interesting. Like GE's working on first and creating things quickly. I think this idea of teaming very big brands with very small agile organizations and trying to get the differential between the two, we're going to see more of that because each one contributes in a different way. So I think that's a good example. But I think
this is our new ways of breeding loyalty. Yeah,
but also just give people a chance to tell their own stories.
Right.
Design for loss of control. This idea of create seeds and have them and the community around them help build those things. I don't think that subtracts from what you need to do as a brand or what you need to do as an organization. I think it actually means you have to be laser focused on what you really do.
I mean, in some ways, the original Nike Plus or the original Nike shoe, where they suddenly discovered that people were completely interested in everybody else, and this initial crudely enabled communicating shoe was transformational for them. That was kind of like almost the beacon.
Oh, that was a huge deal, right? Nike Plus. And it was branded brands. It was strange bedfellows, Apple and Nike. So I think one of the things we say in the book is make a list of the 10 companies you've never done business with that are within a proximity of your product today. It's disconnected, but the minute they're connected, they're going to start becoming social. So make a list of those. Those are probably opportunities for you to do new catalytic partnerships. So there are new opportunities there because they're around each other. So when networking really becomes a seed, we're going to create the social life of products.
It's a really interesting point because it's kind of like APIs between anything, and when it really becomes facile, you're taking the DNA, the intent, the market, the all that stuff of different things, and you're being able to mash it up and build stuff with it.
Yeah, but I mean, imagine Quirky, I love them. I think it's great. They've got egg timers that you can put in your fridge or something like that. But each time they build one of those, they come up with their own new approach for it. They build their own custom circuit for it. They still probably put something as complex as, the pinnacle of all computing in their general purpose machine, mostly to tell you if your eggs are, in need of changing. And so in their mind, the Internet of Things is the Internet of 5 things, and it's my things. And if Samsung does it, it's the Internet of Samsung's things. And again, they don't count past 5. They don't do the math that at some point we're going to have just clothing alone, just the medications in your drawer are going to be hundreds, if not thousands, if not more of things in just the closet or just the medicine cabinet. So we're not really dreaming big enough, And so what's happening is, we're creating these great little islands, and we're making the users be the ones that have to actually keep it. Really, are we going to have 1 million apps on our phone for every single independent Internet of Things thing? That's bullshit. We're not going to do it, right? So apps and all this whole space are becoming the new silos. And we're, again, making the user have to be the connectivity. The user has to swivel chair between this and this and this and this, and bucket brigade between this and this. That's crazy.
So we're going to have this big issue of everybody, vendors all love silos.
Yeah,
And
open wins in this one. Open wins. Play nice with others.
Right. I think we should go take a tour.
Sure. Sounds good.
This is